Hello and welcome to Vishnu's IAS Academy, Hyderabad. Today I take the pleasure of welcoming our online students as well as the offline classroom students. A very warm welcome. And this, of course, you know, is the Hindu newspaper Hyderabad edition analysis for today. And before I start, let me quickly also tell the reason behind this initiative. Of course, one reason is to save your time, because it is very time consuming exercise to look up the entire newspaper and then pick out the articles which are exclusively meant for the UPSC exam, prelims or mains. Second target, of course, is to make these articles easy to understand. There are some very straightforward articles, like some we are going to see today, talking about the Axiom 4 mission. In future, how it relates to the Gaganyaan mission. We will talk about how the Indian government is celebrating 50 years of the black period, the emergency period of 1975-76 during Indira Gandhi regime. These are straightforward articles, but there are often articles on the editorial page. These are difficult to understand. Of course, the language is a bit twisted and they are a little complex. So the purpose is also to pick up those which are UPSC relevant and then make it very easy to understand point by point. With that, I also want to say that tomorrow onwards, we will also be inviting comments. So as the class goes on, you can ask any question based on what we are discussing. Also, I will give you some UPSC mains question after every article that we finish, just to show you that which kind of questions can be, you can get in the mains exam based on whichever articles we finish. Okay, so once again, welcome to the lecture. And as we proceed with today's Hindu newspaper, the first page has an article which is important. After long wait, after persistent delays, we see finally that it is a historical achievement as Indian astronaut Subhanshu Shukla has finally said bye-bye, and he has joined some other famous astronauts from various nations, and now they are ready to be landing into the International Space Station soon. Okay, so this mission, extremely important mission known as Axiom 4 mission. Persistently, sometimes due to technical problems, weather-oriented delays, we were seeing that the dates were just getting pushed forward. But finally now yesterday, all the astronauts have safely taken to the space mission. Now, of course, we know that this mission is going to land into the International Space Station, and that should happen about, say, 4:30 p.m. Of course, some plus minus estimation is there. Let's also remember that this is a 14 days mission. There are two purposes. The short-term purpose is to conduct some scientific experiments, observations. But the longer term, especially for India, target would be to see how this mission is successful, given the point that maybe by 26 or 2027, we are going to launch our Gaganyaan mission also. That will be the first human, crew mission to the space. So again, it is going to be just an eye-opener about how is the readiness, how is the preparedness, hence the mission is crucial. Now, which air capsule has taken these astronauts into space? That's an important to remember name, and this is the SpaceX Dragon Crew capsule, and this will enable a safe docking in the International Space Station. As I said, the activities they are going to conduct will be very, very scientific in nature. They will study the rare earth materials. They will study in real time, whatever samples they can collect. And then, of course, later detailed investigation will go on regarding that. So this is quite an important development, especially for India. And then there are more articles which follow up this one. But as of now, let's remember that it's a great, great achievement for India's astronomical missions. Okay, and with this, now let's quickly go down and see other important articles for the day. Now, as we proceed further, I'll show you some crucial articles from the editorial page. Here comes the editorial page, and as I said, not every article every day is UPSC relevant. Something similar is true for the front page editorial article. It says a lofty concept, a governor and unwanted controversy. Although the debate about authority of the governor of a state and the authority of the state legislative assembly, of course led by the chief minister and other ministers, There is always a debate about who should have an upper hand when it comes to making key critical decisions regarding state affairs. This article is also talking about something similar, but why I do not want to go much in detail is because it's a purely political article. This article talks about the agenda of Bharat Mata, how we personify our great land, the mother goddess. But it's very sad that people like Jawaharlal Nehru, Sister Nivedita, Rabindranath Tagore, later Abindranath Tagore, all these people have in detail spoken about the relevance of Bharat Mata Ki Jai, a slogan that had inspired Indian freedom fighters to actually fight for complete independence, to stand up against the British Raj. But today, it's quite sad that in the state of Kerala, the whole idea of Bharat Mata has been shrouded in a controversy. The controversy became prominent as the governor was celebrating and the governor was kind of worshipping an image of Bharat Mata, the mother goddess of India, in the form of a deity. Now this, they are saying, is not constitutional. So the chief minister, the other ministers feel that until something is clearly specified in the constitution, the governor should follow the rules, protocols and policies that are set for his or her role within the constitution. Any such act of either personifying the mother goddess, any act of religion, any act of tradition and culture does not suit the position of governor, because the governor has to be a very apolitical role. He has to play a role that is completely beyond cultural and religious differences, and hence it became a huge political controversy here. Of course, the article also says that back in history in the 19th century, it was the famous novelist Bankim Chandra Chatterjee who had given the idea of Bharat Mata in his very famous work called Anand Mat. So therefore, at that time, we know that Punjab and Bengal were major centers of nationalism, Swadeshi boycott movement, especially after the partition of Bengal of 1905, how the people of Bengal had risen up in unity against the atrocities, the problems created by the British Raj. But today it is quite sad to see that this issue has become so political and so controversial. It is an emotional bond that people of India feel. But still, it is not mentioned anywhere in the constitution. So therefore, this article says that the governor has a duty to be bound by, to restrict himself or herself to the advice of the government of the state. For example, if the governor chooses to place things like photographs, idols, or pictures, portraits in places like the parliament functions, in places like inaugurations of government offices, then it would just mean that the governor is overriding his or her constitutional position. So this decision is not very disciplined one in light of our constitutional instructions given to the place and respect of the governor. So that's what the article talks about, that let a governor be a very apolitical, a very neutral and a very constitution oriented position. Pretty political. So that's all about the article I want to say. But with this, there is another article, as I said. There are two in fact. One is here, the main article. It says the axis of upheaval in the West Asia conflict. I know that we have been talking about the West Asian conflict for a very long time now. Ever since the war between Iran and Israel had become quite serious, and there was a chance of, problems coming from the nuclear weapons as well, because as US said that no, Iran still houses some nuclear facilities. Israel said that the entire West Asia is under fear of the Khamenei-led government because Iran is secretly hiding a lot of nuclear infrastructure. So what happened? A quick historical look into that, and then I will break down the article in very easy words for you. Let's understand that upheaval. Upheaval means a kind of protest or a kind of war that somebody fights. Axis is a close group. Remember, we often talk about the Axis powers, the allied powers from the global, world history. So here also Axis means a circle of conflict, which is always fighting for some reason or the other within the West Asian region. So the article quickly reminds you about how recently, during the war between Iran and Israel, backed by the US then chose to bombard. Remember yesterday I had told you the special technology which only US had, with which US could attack the deep underground and very, very concrete, well protected nuclear facilities of Iran. Remember, we spoke about the Fardau, we spoke about the Natanz, and we spoke about the Eshfaha. All these nuclear facilities were attacked and bombed by the US. Okay, so what happened then? After all this conflict took place, things were getting very critical. Finally, the Trump-led US government said a ceasefire is important, and yes, both the countries agreed. Today, we know there is a ceasefire happening. But what has been the result of this ceasefire? As per the article, an immediate result of the ceasefire is that Iran today stands completely decapitated. Decapitated, its political, military and economic resources are now under threat. It does not have the same superior position in West Asia as it had before this war was happening. So today what is happening? Yesterday I explained to you how now in the entire West Asian region, nobody can challenge the might of Israel. Backed by the US, backed by Western diplomacy, Israel is the only most powerful region now. In that in mind, the article is trying to question that if Israel has nuclear facilities that nobody knows, if Israel has so much support of the US, then what were Russia and China doing when Iran was under this sudden attack? Despite, as I said yesterday, Iran being a part of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, despite Iran continuing its engagement with the United Nations organ IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, and it was transparent about its nuclear setup, then why was the attack done? And then suddenly, US says have a ceasefire. The ceasefire was done. Why was Iran treated like a puppet? What were its supporters, so-called Russia and China, doing? The article tells you why Russia and China did not say something openly and why they were passive observers of the entire problem. One reason is that today we clearly see, as per the article, the world is once again divided into two poles. One happens to be the US-led alliances pole. Some examples of this could be the NATO, of course. Then another could be initiatives like Quad, anti-China, to break China's monopoly with friendly nations. Both these show that there is US backed by its own alliances. On the other hand, there is another pole. That is the Russia, China and Iran pole. But this is also backed by some hidden supporters, and these hidden supporters are called as non-state actors. What is non-state actor? Not the government. The organizations and the groups which are outside the government. Example, Hezbollah. Example, Houthis. Examples, militia, Hamas. All these are ready to support Iran. So this is the second block. So one hand you have the US allies, another you have the Russia, China, Iran, and of course secretly all these non-state actors, these extreme organizations which were supporting Iran. So today, as we see, US is calling the other side as the axis of upheaval. That's why the article is called axis of upheaval. Why? Because US feels that constantly Iran and its supporters are creating fight and destabilization in the West Asian region. So this is a word that has been given by the US diplomats to the entire opposite party. Russia, China, Iran, backed by Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah and militias. Understood? This is the pitch of the article. Now the article is also saying then why Russia and China did not do much. They did not do much because as per this article there is no formal agreement. There is no formal treaty between Russia and China and Iran under which they were under some compulsion to come and support Iran. This relationship that these people have, Russia, China and Iran, is a relationship of convenience as per the article. It is not a foundation. It is a relationship of convenience. They will support this alliance when they need to. They will not if they do not need to. Why? Because unlike NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which has a certain article, the article of course is referred to as Article 5. We all know that. Under this, if there is an attack on one country, all other supporters of NATO will come and do a collective defense in support of that country. We have seen that happening in the Russia-Ukraine war, when Ukraine was being supported consistently by the NATO nations. Agreed? So, just like NATO has this Article 5, which calls for collective defense for its members, where is a group to support Iran? There is no such formal agreement that Iran is having with countries like Russia and China, no matter how powerful you call them or no matter how powerful they are. So they are under no commitment to support Iran. That is one reason they were passive. Second, they are all looking at their own economic interests. That is also a reality highlighted by the article. For example, as per this article, Iran has a very important role to play in West Asia. Why? Massive energy and oil reserves. Strategic geographical location. Iran commands the Strait of Hormuz, from where a significant portion of oil and fuel of the world is getting supplied. If Iran would have closed it like it threatened to, it would mean severe supply shocks to so many countries. So Iran has a very important role to play in a very centrally located area. This is called a very crucial geopolitical location that Iran is enjoying. Agreed? Plus, Iran has supporters, as I said, non-state actors. You have this axis of resistance behind Iran. Hamas, I will repeat, Houthis of Yemen, then you have the Hezbollah, of course you have the militia of Iraq, and hence no country wanted to engage deeply in the war. No country wanted to support non-state actors. It would have meant Russia and China supporting extremism, terrorism. So they stayed away very conveniently. Another thing article says is that Iran was one country which had supported Russia in its war against Ukraine by supplying crucial drone technology. If you remember, Russia had used very critical state-of-the-art drones. Where were the drones coming from? The technology was Iranian technology. So therefore, Russia was supposed to help Iran openly. But here again, Russia's hands were tied. Why were the hands tied? If you remember, in Syria, already the Assad-led regime has fallen down. If you have difficulties in understanding these small nitty-gritties of world politics and international relations, we can do a separate session and explain you the background of all the situation of West Asia. Just let us know in comments. We will provide a separate class to understand all these difficult concepts in case you are just beginning, okay? So in Syria, there was a fall down of the Assad-led government, which means Russia lost its impact in Syria also, because the Assad government was supported by Russia. Now it is not there. Plus, Iran is experiencing sanctions by the US. It is an isolated country today. Russia wanted to come, but it could not have. On what basis would have come? Neither an agreement, critical dependence on Iran for defense technology, the fear of getting in a direct confrontation with US, the fear of getting in a direct confrontation with Israel, and then taking support of people who are so-called terrorists. These were the things that kept Russia away. And both the countries, China and Russia, continued to be passive, because today both the countries, Russia and China, are looking to promote their military, economic, political interest only. Russia is already wasting too much resources in the Ukraine war. Too much defense expenditure has gone up. It has no energy left now to participate in another war. Talking about China, China also has a very secret agenda here as per the article. The agenda is that China wants deliberately that the US should be busy in dealing with the West Asian crisis. Because if you are focusing in West Asia as Donald Trump, then you will have less time to focus on the region of Indo-Pacific. That is good for China. Of course, China wants that Indo-Pacific region should be kept away from US attention, because China is slowly monopolizing this region year after another. Remember its wars over Senkaku Island with Japan, its attacks on Taiwan. China is playing a key role here, right? So that is the South China Sea. That is one area China is dominating, plus also the Indo-Pacific. So China is playing a very strategic role. It is preserving its own interest. Both the Russia and China powers are busy in focusing on BRICS, focusing on Shanghai Cooperation Organization, focusing on de-dollarization, the attempt to create a recession in America. Hence, they saw their personal interest. They did not jump in the war. Iran was left alone. What will be the future? We are yet to see. What happens now with Israel? Only the tallest strong power standing there. So that's the pitch of the article. I hope you understood that. Then the article on the left column is just an extension of the Axiom 4 mission. All I want you to do is to understand why is it relevant for Gaganyaan, the first human space mission that shall be launched in 2026 or 2027. The key player, the key individual we need to remember is Subhanshu Shukla. Let's see what are his experience and researches that he takes up now as he is ready to land in the International Space Station on board the space capsule made by the company SpaceX. Here also there is a complication. Now Elon Musk, the owner of SpaceX, the entire industry, the entire company which manufactures all these space capsules in collaboration with NASA, is having a bitter relationship with Donald Trump today. One article, one small article of the newspaper also says, will this endanger private space missions and NASA collaborating towards more space explorations? We are yet to see what happens in the future. So just remember that how Shubhanshu Shukla's mission takes place, and we are yet to see that what data comes into that. Just remember, it's crucial for the Gaganyaan mission that's upcoming in 2027, and there is a massive expenditure that has happened even on the present International Space Station journey of the astronaut Shubhanshu Shukla. Okay, so with this I take you down to another article that's very important. It's right here. Now this is important. Why is it important? It is important for GS paper 2, polity governance. Tomorrow I will tell you how questions are created on such articles. Second, it is important for GS paper 1, social problems of migrant labours in India. There are broadly 2-3 kinds of migrant population in India. One is interstate migrants, those who migrate from one state to another. Second, intrastate migrants, who migrate within the same state. Intra means inside. Within the same state, for finding work in the city, they leave the village and go. Women are a major component of intrastate migration. They migrate for marriage purposes. There is a third category called circular migrant. Circular migrant is somebody who keeps migrating off and on from city to state. From city to village, and from village to city. Sometimes they keep migrating between borders of 2 states. So these are the broad categories of migrants. What is this article saying? Article is questioning the problem of lack of voting rights. For whom? Migrant population. Remember, when you talk about vulnerable population in India, a segment of population that is characterized by lots of social problems, unemployment, poverty, poor nutrition, lack of formal education. There is one more problem article is talking about. This vulnerable segment is migrant population, migrant workforce. New problem is they don't have enough voting rights. We often talk about how in our constitution we have this article 326, which says every individual has a right to vote. It gives us the right to cast our franchisee, the right to vote. This article talks about de-enfranchisement. Snatching away, taking away somebody's legal right to vote. Why is it happening? Let's see. Article is saying that today the major group in India which is not able to cast its vote, whether it's in Lok Sabha election or whether it's in state assembly elections, whether it's in the local urban bodies elections, they are the migrant population. Why? Because they often have to leave their constituency where they are a registered voter and they migrate to work either within the state, another city, intra-migration, or outside the state, inter-migration. In this process, there is a lack of mechanism, there is a lack of good process on the part of Indian government, or there is a lack of implementation of the policies of Election Commission of India, which ensures that migrant laborers also come on time and they are able to give their vote. This is undemocratic. It is making them vulnerable by not allowing them to participate in political process as important as giving your vote. Article says Bihar happens to be one such state which has the highest number of out migrants, which means maximum people leave Bihar and they go out. This is called emigration. Please understand, emigration would mean when you leave an area and go out. This is the opposite of immigration, when you come into an area. Immigration is more common in industrial states of southern India, Karnataka, Andhra, Telangana, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat. These see highest immigration, and states like Bihar, UP, Chhattisgarh will see maximum emigration. People go out. Why is it happening? A very interesting thing is that Bihar today, as per the 2024 Lok Sabha election data, there was only 56% voter turnout in Bihar. This is much lower than the national average of 66%, almost 10% less. Why? Again, the same reason is coming up. If you talk about the migration rate, then as per this article, in 2021, the overall migration rate in India was about 28.9%. Among these, more than 10% people are migrating for work, and these will always be the people who will leave states like the northeastern states where less employment is there, or states like Bihar which are still economically backward, and they will move to other states. So therefore, what happens? Despite having the right to vote, as I said, under Article 326, they are not able to vote because their data is not captured. Why is it not captured? Let's understand. One major reason is that they travel to a distance which is away from their home constituency. They are not able to get registered twice. There is no parallel registration. Sometimes they work in the informal sector. Another major problem is that migrant workers are informal workers. They work in the unorganized industry. Sometimes they don't get leaves or holidays to go and cast their vote back home. So they miss giving their vote. That's a major problem. Another problem is that sometimes there is a lack of such process which allows them to vote at remote locations also. There should be a process that those who have migrated will be quickly registered in the new destination and they can vote from there. That is not happening. That is a major issue. Now, talking about, say, interstate migrants, they are a bigger problem. At least in intrastate migrants, their house is near. They can still go to the home constituency and vote. Government gives a lot of support, encouraging people to vote. But during interstate migration, traveling from a southern state to northern state, it requires expenses. It requires a lot of documentation, like your company should give you, or where you work, it should give you some holiday to go, but they don't do that. It requires a good health condition. That is really missing here. So therefore they miss voting. So now, what is the solution to this problem? As per this article, in 2023, the Election Commission of India had created a very good initiative. Which was this initiative? This initiative was to allow, remote ballot. It means remote electronic voting machines were to be introduced. If they were introduced, then people in 72 constituencies across, they could have given their vote easily through remote process. They could have given it through remote voting machines. That was a very important initiative, but it was not implemented successfully. Second problem is that postal ballots are a very good choice. You post your vote and then you send it through regular mail. But that is today allowed for workers of the armed forces. It is allowed sometimes to some government officials, but with migrant workers, it is not there. So that needs to be expanded. Another problem is that sometimes migrants who are spending at one place, who are spending a time of more than 6 months at a given location, they should be allowed to register locally immediately. That will help them in ensuring a proper vote cast. Last but not the least, special focus needs to be given on women migrant population, because women migrate a lot when it comes to intrastate migration, but they are unable to register themselves after marriage. In a new location, they are not able to upgrade their existing registration of the voter ID. So they again are out of the electoral base. And this is something that article talks about, that if we want more access towards voting right for many more people in India who are left behind, implement these solutions quickly. That's the pitch of the article. Now let's quickly proceed. There is a small article here. I won't drag this much, but it just talks about one non-communicable disease. Why I wanted to just give 2 minutes to it is because as per the data collected by National Family Health Survey, in another 5 years to come, a major burden on Indian GDP will be the health sector. In that too, it will be the NCD, non-communicable diseases. Diseases which do not spread from one person to another, like cardiovascular, cancers, like, issues like thyroid diseases, reproductive diseases, but still they have a very high mortality rate. And they lead to premature death also. So this article is just looking at one new kind of problem, that is the liver disease. It says, if we look at the pan-India data, then men have a higher level of liver-associated diseases as compared to women. Clearly, one reason is alcoholism and drug abuse. Another, women have lesser access to medical health care as compared to men. So there are more identified cases of men, patients of liver disease rather than women. So these are two things article says. Article is also saying that, talking about the 2022 data, liver disease was the 8th leading cause of death. If we talk about various diseases impacting people across different genders, different ages and different states in India, it was the 8th major killer. So alcohol use is something that the article has spoken about, plus excessive demand for consumption of meat and dairy products. This also is related to the urban lifestyle. So these are certain things the article is saying. The article is also mentioning that it leads to premature death, late diagnosis. So probably under missions like Poshan Abhiyan, or under missions like, where you talk about giving more minimum support price under the state to vegetables, fruits cultivation, like Kerala became one example of giving minimum support price to farmers to cultivate vegetables and fruits, horticulture. So these initiatives could actually decrease the disease burden in India. That is the pitch of the article. Now another very interesting article, page number 8, short read only, important to know that 6 years after the last Kailash Mansarovar Yatra had happened, the pilgrimage had happened, a group of 36 Indian pilgrims have just completed the 18,000 feet high Mount Kailash journey. Why is this such a big issue? It is such a big issue that because after the COVID pandemic and after the fight over the line of actual control, it is for the first time that India and China are trying to restore traveling and the incoming of tourists from one region into another. So that is why it has become a very key global development here. So I want you to just keep this in mind before any fresh or a newer article comes on the issue. And now let's quickly proceed with the last article for the day. It was important because it has come in the science page. Let me quickly show you this article. Okay, and before I do that, there's two more things I want you to know because I don't want to miss out on anything important. Now here is the world news, page number 12 from the Hindu, Hyderabad. One says that, as I was telling you day before yesterday, that US is very proudly claiming that we have attacked all the deep located nuclear facilities in Iran. I gave you the names of all three. You have to remember all three names. In prelims, you can get a question in places in news. 100% you will get. So remember this name. All the names of three sites. Fardow, Natanz, which is the third one? Please write it in the comment box for me. Okay. So, but interestingly, Iran claims that there is no major destruction. We already knew that, right? We were reading this editorial day before yesterday, which said that despite US doing a deep bombardment of these sites, probably Iran will not have a major destruction. Because even the ones which are massive like Fardow, they are so protected under concrete and mortar that barely surface level damage will happen. And even if it does happen, Iran has this huge capacity to build back its nuclear equipment. So that's what the article says. The intelligence agency has said that much damage has not happened in the first place. Okay, with that, there is a small article here talking about the NATO. It says NATO has agreed for further increase in military and defense spending for its allies. Reasons we all know. The West Asian conflict, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, they are saying that now all the member countries of the NATO will commit to invest 5% of their gross domestic product, the GDP, annually on defense and security related spending by 2035. This is something I want you to remember. Okay, and now let's proceed quickly past the sports page into the science page. The last article for the day. Okay, here it is on text and context. Quite important. GS paper 2, social justice. GS paper 1, social problems. Should the method of calculating caste identity in the census change? Is it good right now or is it bad right now? Basic question I'm asking you. What are the problems with the current method? There is a questionnaire. The government officials will give questionnaires. Questionnaires means a set of objective type questions like you get in UPSC prelims. The people will select their caste identity. But is that the right method of doing it? No. That's what the article says. Article says that now we are all getting ready to conclude the next census, the much awaited census in India in 2027. It will happen in two phases. Let's remember, in September 2026, first we will do the listing of all the household units, dwelling where people live. So listing of all the houses will be done in September 2026. Then in 2027, an actual count of people will be done, population enumeration, which will take individual data into account like what job you do, your gender, your a place of living, your income and all these things. But it will also include one more thing, your caste. Caste will also be asked. Why? Because last time we did a caste enumeration was in 1931. Actually, it was also done in 1941 census, but the data could not be processed due to World War II problems. Okay, so it was no use. Now for the first time after 1931, we are taking into account caste data of people. Why is caste being recorded? Is the question article is asking. See, why is caste being recorded? One thing, because from 1931 census, we have no idea about what is the caste breakup, or what is the caste wise population existing in India. We don't know, because the data is already outdated. Imagine, it's 1931, it's prior to independence. That's one thing. Second thing is, the government wants that in the current method only the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe data is being included. Only these categories are being included. Other castes are not included. So with this census of 2027, we want to bring other castes also, other subcastes also in the picture. We want to have a better counting of exactly which subcastes and which castes are there in Indian states. From, they are different from one state to another, but which categories are these? We need a better clarity on them, because naturally they have changed. There is conversion going on. There are other processes in which people also sometimes try to aspire to change their class, in their caste. In sociology, it is called Sanskritization. People migrate a lot, so the data changes naturally, and we want to capture that data. Another thing is that we want all other castes also to be included in the census, so that better social policies and better welfare programs can be created for the ones which are really needy, which are really poor. We want that to be done. Besides, data on unemployment right now, it is very abstract, it is very vague. We need to see more closely which caste groups are associated with which kind of employment. That is important. Another thing is that there is a data called fertility and child survival, child mortality, infant mortality, total fertility rate. These are some important aspects census should talk about. Total fertility rate, child mortality rate, infant mortality rate. But the problem is, so far census operations have not given a good picture of these. Better information comes from National Family Health Surveys. They give you much better. The rounds of NFHS give you much better, picture of this. So therefore, we want our census to do a better job at capturing these details of the population, again for creating better policies for the vulnerable. Now, migration data also right now is not clear. We need more data on exact nature of inter and intrastate and circular migration. Last but not the least, then how should we make the census more inclusive? What should we do? One thing is change the questions. The questionnaire, which means the question format that right now you give to the people to reply and tell you their caste identity and other details, that should be restructured. Remove all the outdated forms, okay, and include the ones which are more relevant to people. For example, the previous one talks about bank account, whether you have or not. Do you own a mobile phone or not? These are not so relevant in understanding the caste nature of employment. So please make it more modern and need based. Second thing is focus on urban areas, because in urban areas there is a very high rate of migration and many people are missed from census collection here. They are constantly migrating, so they are omitted. Please involve them. Last but not the least, if you focus on data that is relevant, that is actually correct, authentic, and that captures more population, it will lead to better social planning, better welfare policies for those who are at the bottom of society. So the article is requesting that please collect such data which doesn't omit, which doesn't drop out anybody from it. So keep the questions very short, make them easy to understand by illiterate people also. Make them, such that people are not wasting their time too much on it. Also, try that we provide caste tribe wise data across various employments, agriculture or industry, so that ultimately the aim is to understand Indian population better. Only then can better government planning happen. So that's exactly the pitch of this article today. And also, I would want to remind you that there was one small mention in the newspaper that we are now commemorating 50 years since the emergency period. So the government is saying that was the Samvidhan Hatya Divas, where you killed the spirit of the constitution. Some people say it was the black period for India. Media persons were put in jail. There was no freedom. Article 19(1)(a), right to free speech and expression. All that was killed. So we celebrate the 50 years and celebrate the commitments, the contributions of all those who fought for the rights during emergency. On that note, I'll end this newspaper analysis here. Thank you so much for being a part of the class. As I said, tomorrow I will also bring you some questions. We will accommodate more comments from your side. If there's anything you want specifically to be discussed, if you are missing out on international relations background, you are still confused between what were the dynamics between Syria and Russia, what were the dynamics going on between, say, Palestine and Israel, you want to talk about the history of all these things, we can definitely come back with a more detailed session. Thank you so much for being with us. Like, share and subscribe our YouTube channel, and all the best.